All right, State, please call your next witness.
State calls Charlene Webster.
Morning. State, when you're ready, you may proceed.
Thank you. Hello, Ms. Webster.
Hello.
Will you please tell us your full name and spell your last name?
Yes, my name is Charlene Webster. Last name is spelled W-E-B-S-T-E-R.
How are you employed, Ms. Webster?
I am a senior crime laboratory analyst with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement at the Tampa Bay Regional Operations Center in the biology section.
How long have you worked for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Since December of 2009.
Will you tell the members of the jury about your formal education, please?
I have a Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology and a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry from the University of Miami. I also hold a Master of Science in Pharmacy with a concentration in Forensic DNA and Serology from the University of Florida.
Thank you. Will you also tell us a little bit about the duties and responsibilities of a senior crime lab analyst?
Yes, as an analyst, I examine items of evidence for the presence of body fluids such as blood, semen, or saliva. I also examine them for any skin cells that may be present from items that may have been handled, touched, or worn. I will take samplings of those items of evidence to try to develop a DNA profile that I can then compare to the DNA profiles of known individuals that are believed to be involved in the case. I will put a statistical weight if I'm able to do that and produce a report.
What is DNA?
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It is the genetic blueprint for life, and it makes us who we are. Your DNA profile is unique, except in the case of identical twins. You inherit half of your DNA from your biological mother and the other half from your biological father. Your DNA is found all throughout your body, so except for mature red blood cells, and your DNA doesn't change over your life. So the DNA I would find in your hair would be the same DNA I would expect to find in your blood.
What method of DNA analysis do you use up at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's office in Tampa?
We use STR testing, which stands for short tandem repeats. And STRs are just small segments that are found throughout the DNA. The number of times those repeating segments are observed varies from individuals. And as I mentioned earlier, since you get half from your mother and half from your father, the number of repeats you get from each person would vary. That process is done in 4 steps. So what I'm going to try to do in the first step is I'm going to take that sample of the evidence and I'm going to place it in a tube. I'm going to add some liquid and some heat, and the purpose of that is just to try to break open those cells so they can release the DNA so I can see what's available to me. The second step is then now to make many copies of the 21 locations on the DNA strand that I'm actually looking at. And I'm trying to make those copies so that way I can get a better idea of the DNA profile. The third step is now, the second step I misspoke was determining how much DNA I actually have present. Once I open up those cells, how much DNA is available to me. The third step is making millions of copies of the 21 locations on the DNA strand that I'm looking at. And then the last step is just separating those copied DNA by size, so that way I end up with peaks on a graph, much like an EKG. And those peaks are your DNA profile for each of the 21 areas of the DNA I'm looking at.
That method that you just described, short tandem repeat, is that supported in the scientific community?
Yes, it is.
By published scientific literature?
Yes.
Okay. Now, your lab in Tampa, is it accredited?
Yes, we are.
With whom is it accredited?
We are accredited by ANAB, which is the American National Standards Institute National Accreditation Board.
And as an individual crime laboratory analyst, do you have some sort of continuing education or accreditation that you have to do personally?
Yes, I do have to do 16 hours of continuing education each calendar year. In addition, I do have to take what's called a proficiency test twice a year. A proficiency test is just a scenario-based test that's given to me from an outside agency. I know I'm being tested, but I don't know the results of the test. Once I receive the samples, I will take the samples from start to finish, just as I would any other case working sample using our standard operating procedures. Once I get my results, I submit it to the testing agency, who then ensures that my results are consistent with theirs, and they will report that back to ANAB, our accrediting body, and to FDLE as well.
When was the last proficiency test that you undertook?
Earlier this year, and I passed it.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. How do you talked about your protocols. How do you ensure that the results that you achieve in your laboratory are correct? How do you know that you're getting the correct results? What steps do you take?
We have controls that are run with all of our samples. So as I mentioned earlier, as a part of that STR process, that I took a sample of the item of evidence to do through the 4 steps. Well, I'm also going to do that with what's called a reagent blank. So it's just an empty tube, and everything that happens to my sample happens to that tube through all 4 steps of the STR process. That's called a negative control, and that just ensures that no outside DNA is being introduced into the samples. In addition, there's also a positive control that's run through the samples to just ensure that all of the reagents are performing and the instruments are performing the way that they should and producing the expected result that is received from that positive control.
Right. As an analyst, do you maintain neutrality when you are working with items that have been submitted to you by various agencies and throughout the testing process?
Yes.
Why is it important for you to maintain a neutral attitude about the evidence that comes into you for testing?
When I receive the evidence, I don't know what to expect as a result, so I'm just going to conduct my testing as I would with every other item that's similar. I'm going to send it through the same process, of course, not to be biased in any way, just to perform it and to try to get any DNA profiles that may be usable in the case.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier about statistical analysis is used as part of the procedure for ultimate DNA analysis. Do you have specialized training in statistics?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the training that you've received in statistics?
So I took statistics as a part of my master's class. In addition to during the training program at FDLE, we are trained on the statistics that we perform, which is currently likelihood ratio. In addition to the training that I received from FDLE, the members of the program that we use also did a 2-week statistical training class on the system, and so I did get that training as well.
Does the Florida Department of Law Enforcement use a particular database as part of your statistical analysis?
Yes, we do.
Can you explain a little bit about that database, please?
The database we use is developed from, the National Institutes of Standard and Technology. That database was published in the Forensic Science International Journal of Forensics in 2013. And basically that database contains DNA profiles from random people who were samples that were purchased, and the DNA types that were observed there are just telling me how common or how rare a particular allele or DNA type may be observed in the general population across 3 ethnicities. The ethnicities we look at are Caucasian, Hispanic, and African American, as those are the 3 common ethnicities found in the state of Florida.
Okay. Why do you use a numerical weight or a statistical weight as part of the DNA analysis?
We add a statistical weight to a sample that is a match, which means that I compared a single source or profile from one individual to a known individual, or an inclusion where I'm comparing an individual to what's called a mixture, where that's from 2 or more individuals. It gives a statistical weight as to how common or how rare given the DNA evidence, how likely it is to see that DNA evidence how likely it is to see that that DNA evidence given the profile that is observed let me rephrase that. The statistical weight gives I'm looking at the DNA profile and I'm comparing a known individual to the profile, either to a single source or a mixture. It just gives weight as to how common or how rare that DNA profile may be observed. Sorry.
Okay. Essentially, does that allow you to put into perspective the results as to how much of that person's DNA is in that particular sample?
It's actually just saying it's comparing two different scenarios and giving a weight. It's comparing how likely that DNA profile could be from the person of interest or an unknown individual. So it's not telling me that that person is actually in the profile. It's just telling me what is the likelihood that the evidence could be from the person of interest versus an unknown individual.
All right, thank you. Now, have you ever testified in court with regard to DNA analysis?
Yes.
How many times, approximately, Ms. Webster?
Probably about 50-ish.
Okay. And can you give us an idea of where in the state of Florida you've given testimony on DNA?
I've gone as high as Tallahassee, and I've gone as further south as Fort Myers, where we have our different regions. So any of the courthouses in between there, I've probably touched on a few of them.
All right, great. Now, I want to ask you about how, as an FDLE analyst, how do you determine or examine an item of evidence to know if there is blood on that item? Can you explain that process to us?
Yes, if I'm examining an item of evidence, I'm going to look at it to see if it has red-brown staining that may be possibly present, as that's somewhat characteristics of what a blood stain would look like. If I observe red-brown staining on the item, I'm going to perform what's called a presumptive test, which is just a chemical change test that tells me whether or not blood is probably present, but what it possibly isn't. I cannot confirm that it is blood, but I can say that blood is possibly present. That color change test takes a clear liquid, and it turns pink if blood is possibly present.
Okay. Did you receive known samples in this particular case of the defendant Dima Tower and also Jennifer and Robbie Tower?
Yes, I did.
In what forms did you receive those known samples, Ms. Webster?
I received a buccal swab from Dima Tower, and I received a blood stain card from Robbie Tower and a blood stain card from Jennifer Tower.
Okay. Now, as to the buccal swab from Dima Tower, did you obtain a complete DNA profile for Dima Tower?
Yes, I did.
And as to the blood stain cards, did you obtain complete DNA profiles for both Jennifer Tower and Robbie Tower?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so did you also receive items of evidence, or did your lab receive items of evidence from the Northport Police Department?
Yes, we did.
Can you please tell the members of the jury, and without going through the entire list, if you could just tell us about items 6.1 and 7.8.
May I refer to my notes?
You may, if it would help to refresh your recollection.
Item 6.1 is described as a DNA sample that was taken from the knife blade.
Okay, and 6.1, was that derived from a kitchen knife? And you
Yes.
Thank you. And then as to item 7.8, can you tell us what that item of evidence is?
Item 7.8 is described as a DNA sample from knife 6's handle.
Okay, thank you. All right. So speaking specifically of those two items, 6.1, the knife blade, and 7.8, the knife handle. And those are from two distinct knives. Am
That's
I
correct.
Thank you. Okay. Did FDLE test those items?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Can you please explain the initial results of that test?
Item 6 is the kitchen knife did give chemical indications for the presence of blood. That means I did that presumptive color change test that I described earlier, and there was a color change for pink. So the results that it gave chemical indications for blood.
All right, and what about 7.8? Just as to the blood, the serology.
That's right. Yes. So there was, I also did obtain, there was chemical indications for the presence of blood on item 7.8 as well.
Thank you. Now let's go back to 6.1. Once you found the chemical indications for the presence of blood on that knife blade, what was the next step in the analysis?
After that, I would have taken there was a sampling taken of the knife handle and the blade, and then the samples would have been placed in a tube that I described earlier and taken through that 4-step process as I described it in order to try to develop a DNA profile for each of those items.
Okay. And what were the DNA results that you obtained from the knife blade, item 6.1?
So for item 6.1, the knife blade, the DNA results obtained demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor.
Okay. And were you able to determine of any of those donors in that particular item, 6.1, the knife blade?
I was able to include Dima Tower as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile. The observed mixed DNA profile is approximately 61,000 times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Dima Tower and 1 unrelated individual than if it originated from 2 unrelated individuals.
Okay. Were you also given an indication of one of the other donors in that mixture?
I was able to include Robbie Tower as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile. The observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Robbie Tower and 1 unrelated individual than from 2 unrelated individuals.
Okay, so if we can break that down just into layperson's language, can you just simplify that for the members of the jury?
As I mentioned in the statistic, it's giving a weight. The type of statistic I'm giving you is called a likelihood ratio, and it's comparing 2 opposing hypotheses. So it's comparing whether or not the person of interest could be given the DNA profile, the person of interest could be the donor of the profile versus if an unknown individual could be the donor of the evidence profile observed. In this case, I'm giving weight to whether or not, for the evidence, if Dima Tower is included, the likelihood for the DNA profile is approximately 67,000 times more likely to occur if it originated from him versus non-related individual. I'm giving weight more to each of those scenarios, and it's on a sliding scale. So if a likelihood ratio of 1 just means that it's neutral. It doesn't give weight to either one of those scenarios. As you get higher above 1, the number 1, it gives weight more to my first scenario of the person of interest being the possible donor of that DNA profile. As it gets lower from 1, it's stating that it's supporting more of that second hypothesis, or that an unknown individual is the one that donated that DNA profile.
Thank you. Now let's move on to the knife handle from 7.8, the other knife, the second knife. Can you please tell us about the results after you did your analysis, Ms. Webster?
The DNA results for item 7.8 demonstrated the presence of a mixture of at least 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor. A complete DNA profile for the major contributor could be determined and is suitable for comparisons. Due to the limited nature of the DNA results for the additional contributors to the mixture, that data wasn't interpretable. So I'm only making comparisons to the major DNA profile. This major DNA profile matched the DNA profile from Robbie Tower. The observed major DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Robbie Tower than from an unrelated individual.
Thank you. Now, I just want to ask you a question regarding this particular evidence. So these knives were in a kitchen, and presumably they were used by all the members of the family at any given time. The family members being Robbie Tower, Jennifer Tower, and Dima Tower. So what distinguishes the DNA that you found on these 2 knives? What's the distinction? Is it because you found chemical indications for the presence of blood as opposed to touch DNA?
Objection leading?
Yeah, let's try not to be
All
so
right.
leading in your question.
Thank you.
Do
So-
you understand the question as a general concept? Can you explain touch DNA versus blood DNA? Okay, I think that's the question.
Please.
Yes, so if blood DNA from blood, blood is as a body fluid in general would produce more DNA or leave more DNA behind than just touching an item. However, I can't say in this case as to which one those came from, as the knives may have been handled as stated by everyone throughout the family. I can't state whether or not the DNA is exclusively from blood or from epithelial cells.
Thank you. But based upon your analysis, were there chemical indications for the presence of blood on both knives?
Yes, there was.
Thank you. May I have a moment, please?
Amen.
Thank you very much. I don't have anything else.
Mr. Gilman, when you're ready.
Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Good morning, and well yourself.
All right. So when you're examining these items of evidence, you examine essentially what's submitted, right?
Correct.
You don't go to the individual law enforcement headquarters and pick and choose what they give to you.
That is correct.
All right. So if they give you, for example, an actual physical knife, you would go through and do all of the swabbing yourself, correct?
Correct.
If they don't give you the physical knife, they just give you whatever the swabs are, you test from the swabs, correct?
Correct.
So you're entirely at the discretion of what is submitted to you as far as what gets tested.
Correct.
All right. And that system is automated, correct?
What do you mean by automated?
I mean, you don't go in and with like a pair of tweezers and pull out DNA, right?
No, I don't use a tweezer to go in. I do the process that we described.
Right. It's automated through machinery, right?
Yes, there are some hands-on portions, but yes, there are some machinery that helps with that.
And the peaks and valleys are essentially computer generated results, correct?
Correct.
All right. The statistical analysis that you do has changed since you started in 2009, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
Okay. And it used to be that you would give numbers like 1 in 15 and make like sounding like really horrible made up numbers for a statistical analysis, correct? And you'd have to count the number of zeros to describe the number?
Yes, we still do that. They're still big numbers now.
Okay. But it sounds to me like you said that the two times that you discovered Robbie Tower's DNA, that statistical likelihood was 700 billion times more likely, correct?
I stated that it's greater than 700 billion times more likely.
Okay. And then for the one instance where you indicated that you found Dima Tower in a mixture, it was 67,000, correct?
Approximately 61,000.
Okay. I think you said both 61 and 67, so it's 61?
It's 61,000.
Okay. And that's obviously closer to zero than 700 billion, right?
Yes?
Okay. And again, we're talking about a mixture, correct?
Yes, for
All right.
both samples.
And using the statistical analysis the way that you do, if you were to use a separate database than the one that you use, would you expect similar or different results?
Objection calls for speculation.
Would you be speculating, or do you know the answer to that?
I generally know the answer to
All
that.
right, I'll overrule the objection. You can answer it.
It would be slightly different, but I wouldn't expect there to be more than a tenfold difference.
Right. So back when you're talking about the big, huge numbers, if we're talking 700 billion, the tenfold difference would be 70 billion, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing further, Judge.
State any redirect of the witness.
Did you find blood on those two knives?
Yes, I did find the indications for blood, yes.
Okay. And in addition, did you also find DNA from Robbie Tower and Dima Tower?
I was able to include Robbie Tower and Dima Tower on item 6.1.
And is that the bottom line of your report? In the most simplistic reductionist terms, is that the bottom line of your report?
Those are the results of my reporting, yes.
Thank you very much.
Is the witness free to step down?
Yes.
No objection.
All right, you may step down now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.